Hey, welcome to Cockeyed and Curious. Today we're going to go through a game of Too Many Bones, and I'll show you some example gameplay through the process. I'll tell you about the game, I'm going to tell you what I like about it, I'm going to tell you about what I find to be fiddly, go over some of the rules, taking 1 to 4 Gearlocks, those are the characters that you're playing, through a series of days, encounters, to ultimately fight a tyrant. Hopefully this will help you determine whether or not you too might enjoy the game. Today I'll be taking on Morrow or Marrow. I'm not sure how the parents went with that one. I'm gonna guess Morrow, but I wasn't at the hospital when he was birthed. But we're gonna try to slaughter him. We're gonna make his parents very sad today, unfortunately. Hopefully they passed already. Throughout the process, we're gonna try not to cheat, either because of the rules being a little bit confusing at times, because of the interplay of different sets of mechanics isn't always clear, and also because it's a solitaire game and no one's looking but a fabricated god. So today I'm going to be taking on Marrow. From what I can tell, he fabricates himself to be a god. Not everyone has a skull for a skull, so he does have that. I'll give him that for the wow factor. Each game you pick a tyrant, and that's the person that you're going to take on. In order to face the tyrant, you have to accumulate so many points over the course of the different encounters, and you have so many different days. Each tyrant card also shows you what sorts of baddies you're going to fight. There are 6 different types of baddies that you can encounter in a given game, though the tyrant cards will define a set of those that you'll use. Some tyrants use all the baddies, some, like Marrow, only use 4 different types. So each time you go against a given tyrant, you'll see different sets of these baddies, which will create different dynamics in terms of what skills you need or don't need in order to make it through the various days. This baddie here isn't one that I actually used for Marrow. However, I just wanted to highlight it because it's one that my girlfriend made fun of me about. You notice that it's a tipsy troll and it has the careless ability, which means that every time a bones comes up on the die, it hurts itself. And so she gave me a hard time because I'm slaughtering a drunk troll. Wait, you're murdering self-destructive drunks? What type of game is this? Yeah, so it's a fair point. Something to keep in mind. So one of the things that's great about the game is each tyrant has a unique setup, its own powers and abilities, and will often change the rules in various ways. As I mentioned earlier, you have a set number of days in which to complete an adventure, and so this is the chip where you use to track how many days you've completed. Each day that you're on represents an increasing load of battle points, which generally reflects how many baddies and how difficult a type of baddie you'll be fighting. You also start with a certain set of encounters for the first few days, as indicated in the lower right corner of certain cards. You'll see there's a 1, a 2, or a 3 to help you know that these are the first encounters that you should encounter. They generally are aimed at helping you develop skill points or grab loot, which will help you then in the more difficult encounters. Usually day 1 is kind of a freebie, you just get some points. Day 2 is often a pretty straightforward battle. There may be some form of assistance, whether or not the baddies come in a little bit weaker, or they might take damage each turn as the battle continues, just to make sure that you win and you can accumulate some of the training points. Sometimes battles will present insane difficulties, but will present a relief valve in the form of a die. Here you will add a baddie that will definitely terrorize your team, but at the beginning of each round, you roll a die, and there's a 50% chance that this insanely hard baddie for where you are can be killed with just one hit. And so there is a little bit of a randomness factor, which is inherent in any dice game. And I think it adds to the tension because sometimes you'll luck out and you'll just be able to kill the thing right away, and sometimes you have to navigate the difficulties of having this baddie that can just one-shot you, or it can just completely deplete your defenses, or whatever the case may be. One of the criticisms that you'll see online about this game is the swinginess of the dice. And I think if that's going to be a strong factor for you, then you probably should avoid dice games to begin with. Because even a game like Castles of Burgundy, where there is mitigation and many different options because of the kind of point salad nature of the game, general rule, dice are random. The variance of the encounters is what keeps the game fresh. Ultimately, each battle is the same. You place your Gearlocks on the board, the baddies, and they move around to the same rules. But the cards that you encounter will change things up. There's one card, for example, that reminds me of the old video games where the floor is ice, and if you move, you don't just move one spot, you slide. There was another game where I played, which was actually kind of fun, even if it's morbid. in that you're fighting on lava. And so every turn, you take 1 hit point of damage as you begin the turn because your feet are on fire. You're just melting into the ground. But the good news is that if you kill a baddie, you can then stand on the baddie's body and you'll no longer take damage. So you have these morbid corpses as de facto floats, which is kind of fun and gruesome all at the same time. Sometimes you can even dodge a battle. They'll give you an option where you'll have this insane battle and you have to read all this text and figure out what is actually going on. Or there's option B, which is basically flee. And sometimes you'll have a detriment for the rest of the game as a result, and sometimes the detriment doesn't really matter because you're going down a certain path and how it impacts you isn't going to go against the strategy you're following. And so that's the fun aspect too. You can kind of float through some of the days, where some of the days will be a slog because it'll just be an all-out warfare for the next hour of your life, perhaps. I'll also mention that each tyrant comes with one or more themed encounters. These are in addition to the general set that you provide, and they may or may not come up in a given game. So each Gearloc exists in the form of a mouse pad on your table. There's different openings for where you can put different dice, and each die represents a skill that you can learn. Some skills are available from the get-go, whereas others you'll follow arrows, so you need to have this die before you can get this die. There's always a set of attributes, attack and defense, hit points, and dexterity, which are represented by a base value plus a die. And those are available for all the characters thus far. The characters each feel pretty distinct. They kind of upend the game in different ways. Tantrum has this rage meter that increases as he's damaged or as he attacks the baddies. And at certain points, he can actually use it to perform insta-kills. But if he goes beyond a certain amount of anger, then he just ends up hyperventilating like a child overwhelmed by emotion and no longer has that ability to do the one shot. Whereas Gasket has a de facto power supply that fuels the use of various skills, and he can actually run out of the power supply and then just start taking damage because he no longer essentially has fuel to keep him going. Setting up battle first involves placing baddies in position. There's a defined progression of how you add them to the board, and they either go into a melee spot or a ranged spot. You also set their initiative die along the track based on what the chip says. And you take a look at this point at the various skills. Over time you'll learn them, but at first you're going to have to consult the rules for each of the skills. For example, this baddie has Hardy. And something to note about the skills is sometimes a description of a skill will have more rules embedded in that description. So you'll see that for Hardy there's a term true damage. So then you have to know the difference between damage and true damage. And this isn't bad, and you pick it up pretty quickly, but it is kind of like whack-a-mole at first with the rules. One rule will lead to another. But once you internalize the framework and the mechanisms, it's not too bad. It becomes very natural, with a few exceptions here and there. Detonate means that the baddie will blow itself up if it's been damaged after it's moved. Rules like this have sent me to Board Game Geek because I wasn't sure. I had a suspicion, but I wasn't 100% sure whether or not movement had to happen. If the baddie was already next to a Gearloc or was hemmed in some way, would it still blow up, or did it actually have to move to blow up? This one may have not been the most edge case of all the different rules, but if you take a look at Board Game Geek or the Discord channel for Too Many Bones, you'll see that people ask questions all the time. There are a lot of questions. And so that's just something you're going to get used to. Have your phone nearby and be ready to quick Google something. The good news is that because this game's been out for a while, most of the questions you have, you will find an answer for. Now, I'm not going to go through the specifics of a battle. Just know that you'll be moving baddies and Gearlocs. You'll be rolling dice that reflect attacks and a defense, as well as other skills. And you'll be navigating the decisional spaces that ensue as a result of all these options. You'll also be removing many, many, many red chips that represent blood flowing from purple forms. Another thing that you might encounter is a good fist pump or two, especially as you brutally slaughter a drunk troll. Tipsy? Nah, it's pretty much wasted. One thing I do love about this game is how dedicated the fanbase is, as well as the involvement of the creators. For example, I essentially one-shotted Marrow, and I was kind of confused by that and wanted to make sure I didn't cheat in some way. So I posted a picture of the end shot on Facebook to get some feedback. And sure enough, I wasn't the first person to ask such a question. This has happened before. Tantrum and Marrow have a long history of Tantrum just whooping his ass. And what was beautiful about this is 21 comments later, I got to engage with people on various things, talk about the encounters that came up. And also, I got several posts by one of the creators of the game, which is cool. It's just kind of fun when you're enjoying something and then one of the people responsible for its creation joins in the conversation. So that was kind of fun as well, and that's one of the great things about this community. So Too Many Bones. It's a fun time. It's been a great way to spend some of my sequestration at home during this COVID-19 insanity. It's a way to spend a couple hours at the table, rolling some dice, making decisions, enjoying the tactile sensation that the game provides. And I recently opened up the Undertow expansion, which can also serve as a standalone game, to fight Barnacle, which is this tentacled octopus-like creature that reminds me of the bad monster from the Popeye movie with Robin Williams. Essentially, you're floating on a raft, and these tentacles pop up all around you, and they attack the raft if you're not there. They attack you if you are, and you just have to keep butchering them. You're slicing them down. It's kind of like a Hydra situation. You take one out, another one appears, and then eventually the actual head, main body form of Barnacle will manifest somewhere, and then you need to take it out, but it can also return its tentacles to around you, and it's just this mayhem, and it just really changes the game up. You're not just chasing this baddie along the mat, it's on the perimeter trying to grab you, and it can even pull you off the boat, and you got to get back on. It's just fun, and that's just one of the tyrants of several that come with the expansion. So I recommend that you check this game out if you have a chance to do so. It's a bit goofy, sure it's a little random, there are dice, and it can be a bit frustrating at times, given the need to consult rules and sometimes rules on rules. But overall, it's a lot of fun, and if you don't let the mechanics of needing to figure things out weigh you down too much, and sometimes you just let it go, and sometimes you say, okay, this will be the time I consult Board Game Geek, then I think you'll have a good time with it. It definitely has a lot of variety, a lot of replayability. It's not hard to solo multiple gear locks, which is nice. I don't know if you've ever played Spirit Island, but if you try to take 2 or 3 spirits on your own, it gets a little confusing. Whereas in this game, I don't seem to have that problem, which is something that I appreciate. And if you can get someone else to the table, it's a lot of fun to play with someone. You can have discussions, there's decisional spaces I mentioned, and it's just a good time. I highly recommend this.